The Word Docs acknowledge that we meet on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with this land. We acknowledge that these lands are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today, and we extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome back to Word Docs. I'm your host today, Dr. Amy Matthews, and I'm here with Dr. Alex Vickery-Howe.
Hello.
Who is looking well recovered from his play, from the run of Watchlist, which I hope you all got to see. And I'm also here with Dr. Sean Williams.
Hello, and I didn't get to see Watchlist, and I'm very sad about it.
It was very funny.
We can't do our review.
I'm going to make up scenes that didn't happen. I'm just going to the great scene with the troll and Elle Macpherson.
That's right, the
That wasn't in the script. What?
He would have come for Elle. If you put some sport in there, he'd be there.
Yeah, we're teasing Sean about his.
He doesn't like the sports.
He doesn't like the sports.
I don't understand sports ball. It's very complicated.
Anyway, today, now that we're back and feeling a bit frisky because we're away from our marking, we thought we'd address a listener question. Alex, do you want to share the question with us?
I'm going to do a shout out to David Hurst, who...
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
To some acclaim, played the vampire character in Once Upon a Midnight, and also saved my life because
That's the bit I would put first. Okay. Maybe. This is the man who saved my life might be the first thing in the sentence.
This is the man who saved my life because I was heavily medicated and tried to get out of a window. I tried to get onto the balcony in an apartment in Okinawa, and he steered me back to the bed and said,
wow.
"No, that's, whatever you think you're doing, that's not what you should be doing." So David suggested that we should do an episode on depictions of writers in fiction.
Interesting. I was thinking film when you first said it.
Well,
I just realised when
it can
you
be
said
anything.
fiction.
It can be film. It can be a novel. It can be a TV series. One that he mentioned was I want to say Rear Window, but it's not Rear Window. The Stephen King one with Johnny
Dark Half.
No,
There's a
but
lot.
that's another one though. That's worth talking about. The one with Johnny Depp and
Bag of Bones.
no,
Oh,
it might just be called The Window.
I don't know that one.
They
But there's
changed
also
the title
John
for the
Cusack
film.
in the hotel room, and there's also The Shining. Like
Yeah.
Stephen
They're
King
all
has
writers,
an
but
awful lot about writers because I think there's this joke, right, that once writers get out of having day jobs, they don't know what to write about, so they write about characters who are writers.
Well, that's the
Window.
terrible
It's
second
Secret
novel
Window.
cliche, isn't
Yeah.
it? Oh, The
Yeah.
Secret Window, yes. The second novel of writers is often the novel about the writer struggling to write a novel because
Because that's what they're doing.
writers have spent 10 years writing their first novel and then they've got to write a second novel in a
And
year.
you get super lazy about doing research about jobs. I think that's great.
Or just go with writer. It's easy.
The thing I have to say, because I do like Stephen King, I find that his structure is often odd, like because he seems like a really organic writer, and often I feel like I could chuck out whole sections of the book.
Completely.
But I do think he captures the feeling of being an organic writer when he talks about writing. This sense,
Hugo has a writer in it too.
yeah, it does. Actually, a lot of them do. I'm looking at my bookshelf, there are so many of them that feature writers.
But I feel that he writes about writers honestly. Is that what you're saying, Amy?
I think that's what I mean, that you get the feeling, well, A, that it's just work, but then this sense, I was thinking about this the other day because we are, as we've said all year, writing new topics all the time this year. So I've been thinking about what I'm going to do next semester and thinking about my frustration with I'm not the best at teaching craft. I can do it. And same with workshops. Like I really am a ideas person. Like I like talking about literary theories and cultural studies and texts and
Me as well, I think.
yeah, I don't like messing with my own process too much. I don't want to think about it too much, which I know that is a little bit mystical, but I think he captures that weird dissonance where you are very practical, but you're also aware there's magic involved.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't realise you guys felt that way because I love talking about craft. I love getting down dirty. So that means we complement each other really well. I
Yeah.
think that's
I don't know how he got from craft to getting down to dirty. Did it
Dirty craft.
dirty craft?
dirty craft, crafty dirt.
Yeah, I do feel that sense of magic, and like I don't want to, when I'm writing at my best, I think I let go of all conscious thought and I'm just in it.
And the thing with Stephen King is, and they are very unstructured books, but most of the time I think he does get away with it because you're in there with him. It's only sort of afterwards you kind of reflect and go,
That was messy.
that was a bit odd.
What just happened?
What just happened? And did it have to link to the Dark Tower? Does everything have to link to the Dark Tower? But I think he does capture that mind very well. There's also a Daniel Radcliffe film I'm thinking of where, Alec's brain is now leaking like a sieve. He plays...
I love a podcast where one of the presenters Googles live.
Yeah, I know.
I just think that's so exciting.
This is about craft and process. And people listening are going like, we know what you're talking about, Alex. Just freaking get there. But he's
and Sean's thinking, this is all going to have to go.
This is more work for Sean.
But he's in front of the typewriter the whole time, must be Kill Your Darlings, right?
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
He plays Allen Ginsberg.
Ah, right.
I was thinking of a Stephen King story. Misery? No, not Misery.
And he's
there's
just
another one.
He's just going mad in front of a typewriter. And I'm like, I don't know if that doesn't seem to me to be certainly not a flattering portrayal. I think he's masturbating in front of the typewriter at one point.
Oh wow. Yeah, let's not cover that one. But that's funny because that madness, I think Stephen King goes there too. Because if you think about The Shining, but also Lacey's Story,
the dark half, as Sean mentioned, the dark half is really about that sort of existential split that happens.
And I think adaptation gets that too. Charlie Kaufman, that idea of how mad you can feel sitting in your own head all the time, or like when you can't get into your own head, or when you can't get what's in your head onto the page, like that sense of the tyranny of the typewriter.
Adaptation also, because his twin brother, his twin brother has a screenplay called The Three, where the killer, the victim, and the detective are the same person, and it makes no logical sense. But then everyone is reading it and finding it amazing. I find that very realistic when someone just has the worst idea ever, but it just takes off.
Well, I have to say, we're talking about portrayals. I can't go past Romancing the Stone
of
as a romance writer. The opening scenes where the credits running, where she's finishing her book and you just see her house in chaos. Like there are no dishes left. She's crying. And she's got her headphones on, but she's been crying because she's done the final scene and there's no tissues left. There's no tissue paper. There's just a Post-it note on the things. They buy tissues. And, and this thing. And then she celebrates, right? She feeds the cat. She pours her wine and she celebrates the end. That feels like the end of a book where you've limped to the end.
Yes.
And you've given up your life.
It's all over, The house is on fire around you. Do you cry?
And the other end of the process, there's Throw Mama from the Train, where you've got Billy Crystal trying to start the book. And endlessly, and the wastepaper basket is full of paper. The night was. He's doing sticky tape on his nose. He's making cups of coffee, spilling cups of coffee.
Oh, coffee. I can make endless cups of coffee.
Yeah, coffee is, I spend most of the time making coffee and talking to myself.
The phone is bad. Like since text messaging or Facebook messaging or any kind of messaging, I can distract myself very easily.
Does it help when we text you to say, how many words today, Amy? How many words have you done? Does that help? That must inspire
accountability.
You.
Or if it's opening night of your play and another playwright rings from interstate to say, how's it going?
In Act One.
But do you, either of you or both of you, do you, I mean, that the crying thing's interesting. Do you cry? Do you laugh? Do you shout? Do you, if someone was to put a camera into the room, would there be, because I was in a writing workshop once where everyone left their webcams on while we wrote for 40 minutes. I didn't because I know how to use a webcam, but a lot of the others just left themselves out there. And it was fascinating because they were talking to themselves. They were getting up and walking. One of them was acting out what I think was a sword fight, or maybe
it was only a sword fight.
We're back to Ginsberg again.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. I thought, because these were all performance writers, so they were writing scripts. And I thought, they're actually, some of them have an acting background.
That's interesting.
So they're actually getting up and doing these things to kind of play them out. And I thought, isn't that interesting? But would I see you crying, or would I see you laughing or playing with your lightsaber?
I feel the emotions. I would feel the emotions. I don't know how much I'm externalising. I don't think maybe I've cried once. I killed a character once. So I think I might have had a tear or two. But what's interesting is because I'm editing at the moment, the feelings will come back. And this is the sad book I wrote last year. And so just the minute I started working on it again, that feeling of complete sadness.
Lovely.
So I probably do reflect it, and I do make myself laugh sometimes, which is a bit tacky. Sean, what about you?
Well, all my emotional reactions while I'm writing come back to the craft. I mean, I am feeling the emotions, but they're on the inside and they're coming out from the page. But if I've got a writing problem and I solve it, I might do a little happy dance and hands in the air. Or if I'm really frustrated, I might tear what little hair remains out of my head. Or if I'm thinking, so I'm reflecting my own inner process, I guess. But I have cried when I've been writing scenes, and then, as you say, Amy, when you go back and read those scenes, it can be really heartbreaking.
Because I do think, I guess like with acting, it only works if you're feeling what the characters are feeling. If you're trying to get emotion, I mean, some writing is not interested in getting people to feel emotion, but our genres do. So I think if you're not feeling it in your body, it's very hard to capture it on the page.
Yeah, it's interesting watching watch list on Friday. There are certain emotions that went into the writing that then when people act it out, come back at you, which is really kind of interesting. And you go, oh, that's making me feel. And you go, oh, that is what I felt as I was writing it.
There's a lot of rage too in that.
There's a lot of rage.
Near the end, it all gets kind of uncapped, this kind of rage.
Yeah.
That particularly Delia's feeling.
When Delia kind of blows at the sort of towards the end. And a lot of that, I remember writing that and going, oh, I'm not going to keep this. This is too bitter. This is too, and Caleb Lewis, imaginary friend, said, this is you showing your fangs and this is what you have to do.
Yes.
And Murray Bramwell said the same thing recently. But also I think the young love stuff, like I think I was in a kind of like nostalgic young love kind of space for some of that. And I always kind of get the kind of, I
love those moments. I like writing that too.
We're all a bit sappy, aren't we?
I want to join you in writing a romance book one day, Amy, so we can just feel.
It's nice. It's nice to end with a smile, I think. But they're really hard endings, I think, like to try and, who said it? I can't remember. I'm not going to misquote someone, but the idea that the first chapter sells the book, but the last chapter sells the next book. So there's so much weight on that last chapter and that last scene. And with a romance, it's that optimism and that warm, fuzzy feeling, but you don't want to slip over into being really sentimental.
Yeah.
You don't want to Spielberg
so it's quite
No.
Yeah, I like Spielberg. I'm a sap.
I love Spielberg too, but I don't like his endings. They just go on too long. Often, Anyway.
I would like to circle back to me when we talk about Stephen King, when you were talking about your process and craft, because I do think Stephen King is the only one I can think of off the top of my head that really gets at the feeling I have when I'm writing that really, that have you read Lacey's Story? Have you watched the new adaptation that's out?
I haven't. The reviews are so mixed. I'm not sure whether to watch it or not.
The first time I read the book, I found it so hard to get into and so confusing because it's quite experimental for him. And then I read it a second time and I think it's his best book. I just love it. I just think it's amazing. But it is a hard book. It's not one of his easy reads. And it's so much about being a writer and being a writer's spouse. But he's kind of putting forward this idea, which he's touched on a bit, which I know Alan Moore also has. There's another comic book writer I won't think of. What's his name? He wrote The Invisibles. Does anyone remember? It's another English guy. It'll come to me. But they believe...
Quick, Google, Alex. Google to the listeners.
It's called The Invisibles. Anyway, they all believe in this that there's a story world, like a collective consciousness that we all have.
Oh, yeah.
And that you access.
Yes.
That you don't come up with it. It goes back to the romantics and the idea that you're a conduit rather than, that it comes through you, but it's not necessarily from you.
Do you mean Grant Morrison?
Yeah.
Grant Morrison. So they have this idea, and Alan Moore actually thinks he's a wizard, I think. Well, he might be a wizard.
He thinks he's a wizard. That's next level.
Judgmental.
He's a practicing wizard.
Yeah, that's right. So, but they believe in this, and so Lacey's story is about this, that there's this story, another world you go to as a writer, and there's this pool of stories that you kind of get hypnotized by and draw from, and that if you live with a writer, you're constantly aware that they're disappearing off into this other space, and I do feel that in a practical way and in a kind of magical way. The practical way is that by the time your work comes out and people read it, that was you a couple of years ago. And so you, now
absolutely.
I'm walking around living these whole lives that you guys don't know about and my partner doesn't know about, and I'm living in another life all the time that they'll learn about in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's really true. And you can get into kind of a dissociative state where you where I think where the fictional becomes a little bit more real for a few weeks there, and you forget. It sounds particularly mad, but you forget to engage with reality because you're like, I'm over there. There's something big going on over there. You know, there's a virus. They're going to destroy the world. You know.
So I think to get back to, was it David? His question is that I think a lot of the representations are tapping into that kind of madness. You know, so when we talked about Charlie Kaufman, that's him unable to access the story world. Right? The door's locked. But, they tap into that sense that we disappear off somewhere, and it's all a bit... I think Stephen King captures the madness of it quite well, but the sense of kind of absolute sheer magic, which readers experience too, I think, when you first discover reading as a kid, that sense of magic.
Yes. If it's landed, yeah, absolutely. Are you making me think of the Thursday Next books, the YA novels by Jasper Fforde, where there actually literally is a library of plots and stuff that people go to, and when characters are not actually busy doing, when no one's reading their book, they're free to kind of
That's cool.
enter each other's books and kind of hang out. And
That's
It's the Toy Story of literature.
It is the Toy Story of literature. The Cheshire Cat actually runs the library, or he's the first person. He's always in the middle of it, which kind of makes sense. But it's Mr. Toad having drag races with Miss Havisham from Great Expectations that I just love. And then if someone reads the book, they've got to hurry back. And often if they're late, the book's a bit confused and muddled and not very well plotted, and they have to kind of make up for it with an extra scene. But the idea that, it's kind of the idea of parallel worlds, I think, is really interesting.
See, I think this is all very interesting and very. It's metaphorically, it feels very real. But it's a bit like when writers say my characters are real people and they speak through me and they control the story, and I go, get over yourself. You know, they're not real. You made them up. They can do whatever you want them to do, and if you can't make it plausible, then write it better. That's me at my harshest day. But my brain sticks at that point where you're making it real. I quite like the first Jasper Fforde book, but it just, I don't know, it just felt like...
goes too far for you?
It just went too far for me, as both as a sort of a story conceit, like... one book is fine, but a whole series of books, I couldn't sustain my disbelief. But also as a glorification of the romanticism of writing, I stick at that too, and I think writing is a job, and I really like that angle of Stephen King's writing, and that whole using your imagination can be a very attractive process, and is something that we as writers and readers really, really enjoy and find very seductive, and it can be addictive. But it's no different to a chef designing a new kind of cake, or even a sports ball player designing some new move with his foot and the ball. You know, but that kind of creativity or immersion.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think of acting and directing, all that stuff as well. I think characters can do the unexpected, but that's more about whether you've constructed them. Maybe you haven't constructed them in a way that fits the plot you've written. And there's the point where you go, okay, actually, the person I've created wouldn't do the thing that I want them to do. I've only had that happen once or twice where I've gone, actually... But I don't think it's a magical process. I think it's more of a kind of, there's a dissonance between my plotting and my character creation. And now they're not going to do what I want them to do.
It also might just be a question of flow, like how deep in flow you are. Because the more in flow you are, the less consciously you're making choices.
Yeah.
Or, or that you've changed, if something's had a long gestation period, you've changed, you're no longer so connected to that original idea, so you let the character do something kind of out of left field.
And there's so many variables. When we're creating characters and worlds and stories, there is so many variables all in play at once. And we're not in conscious control of all of them. So, Amy, when you said that when you're writing, you're not thinking consciously, you're just letting it coming out. There's a very large part of you that has learned how to do stuff unconsciously. It's like all those little subroutines in Windows 10 or
learning how to drive a car, right? The gears just happen.
It's all happening. Yeah, but as soon as you stop to think about it, it falls over.
It's mastery, right? Like once you've done your 10,000 hours and got your mastery. But I guess just to get use one of my revolting metaphors, it's a bit like sex. I think you don't want to be thinking about it too much while you're doing it. You just want to go and enjoy it.
Can I touch the weenus? Should I touch the weenus? Why am I thinking about the weenus?
Why is their weenus wobbling?
But, like that self-consciousness can get in the way of something working or not.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
If you're writing certain kinds of things, and everyone's different. I mean, that's what we always say. Like, I think it's really important. We say this to our students, to learn your own process. And you do that by trying lots of different things.
That's right.
I hate it when people impose a process on you. I think it's the most frustrating. I mean, in an educational context, I think that makes sense, but there's nothing worse than working with a producer or director or someone who goes, you must now do the 84 dot point thing, or you must now do the whatever, the colour-coded thing.
Yeah.
Where's your Act 3 turning point?
Yeah, exactly.
On page 75.
Exactly. And you teach these things, and they're good tools for when things break down. But there's nothing worse than when people make that a kind of paint-by-numbers approach, I think. It sort of kills it.
And that's where it's good if you know yourself, because you can come back and say, that doesn't work for me. Like I don't like people reading my first draft. I want to write the whole first draft because I'm organic and I'm not quite sure where I'm going. And so I will say, you can see it when it's done. And these are the reasons why, and people seem okay with that.
I would share the second draft, but I would never share the first draft. That's really
share with who? Who are we talking about sharing with?
Oh, like agents or editors or even just, I wouldn't share with writing groups normally. I have a couple of trusted people. If I'm stuck, I might show them, or I might talk through an idea. But what I find is people kill the magic for me. Here's
a T-shirt. People kill the magic for me.
Yeah.
I want one.
It's my life motto.
Because you haven't quite put on the page. Early on, you haven't got on the page what's in your head exactly. And if people kind of criticise it before you've got it down, it kind of kills it.
Well, that's like doing the 83 or 84 points. They're like, well, there's the story. I don't want to tell it anymore. It's just been dot pointed. The magic is dead, Have either of you ever read or seen a depiction of an author which just really annoys you because it's so off base?
Oh, over and over and over and over again.
Yeah?
I have come to really despise depictions of writing, particularly in film, but also in books. I find that they don't speak to me as a professional, except I agree with you, Amy, that Stephen King's pretty much on base, although I don't believe in the existence of a story world, of course, but I'm sure Stephen King doesn't either. But I find them so irritating because they're so often speaking to stereotypical ideas. Like, one of my favourite shows is Black Books, and one of my favourite episodes is the episode where they have to co-write a story together.
Yes.
So good.
And it's a brilliant episode, except for that moment where they first sit down to write and they've got to get the pencils, and it's all that writer's block stuff I find really irritating and annoying because it's too easy. It doesn't feel authentic. It felt cliched. But then later, that story is brilliant, turning the giant tome about a jaded university professor into a story about an elephant in a balloon. I think that's fantastic. So I don't know, but maybe it's because it's so familiar to me. Maybe I know so many writers and...
Well, you're looking for escapism probably, and it's like, I can't escape into that.
Yeah.
You're talking about my job, you bastards.
You watch Scrubs, I guess that's not what being a doctor in an emergency room is like. I guess...
Apparently it's the closest depiction on television. Apparently it's so close.
I picked the one. What about Grey's Anatomy?
Yeah, well, a friend of mine's a lawyer and was like, it's not like Boston Legal. This sucks. I thought it would be like Boston Legal. We'd bounce through the office. We'd have affairs. We'd look glamorous.
Where's William Shatner?
Where's William Shatner? It's actually really drab and grey.
Yeah. I have to say, this sounds really laughable, but have you ever seen Shakespeare in Love? There's the moment where he's writing Romeo and Juliet while he's having the love affair, and stuff that's happening in his life is ending up in the play. And that is so true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
That is so absolutely what happens, is that someone will say you're in flow and whatever's happening around you at the moment, you're weaving into the actual book that you're writing.
Well, I don't know if you noticed in Watchlist, Amy, there's a line where she says you're really medium at this, which came from you.
I did. That actually made me
Co-writing
laugh.
credit.
Also, the fact that the mother's a romance novelist, I think, which is only hinted at.
Yeah, I liked that too. Alex.
Well, because it only occurred to me in rehearsal. I went, "Why the hell is she a romance novelist?"
Because I was hanging out with Amy.
Hanging out with Amy, I think. Yeah, and there's only like maybe 3 lines that.
Yeah, I noticed the medium one that made me laugh.
Yeah, and you kind of go, these things sink in.
Where am I in watch list? What did I not say anything that inspired you, Alex? Or am I Roger?
No, you're not Roger. I wouldn't tie you with the Roger brush.
Word docs, wasn't it? 2019.
Yeah, we just started. Yeah, well, maybe Sean is yet to appear in my subconscious.
The sequel.
Dad was really offended because he was an urn. Dad just went, "Oh, great, you killed me in Act 1, Scene 1. I'm a freaking urn."
But he was heroic. He was a
heroic character, but he was actually sitting next to the urn, and he's like, "Well, this is shit."
I hope you got a photo of that. That would be amazing.
Could you keep the urn and like give it to Mal?
Describe it.
So here, you'll need this one day.
And also, Dad, you were on stage for the whole play.
Starring
there was a spotlight
role
on you for the
Starring
whole play.
role. The other depiction of writing I'm thinking of is it Stranger Than Fiction, where Will Ferrell plays a character who's going to be killed by an author?
No. I feel guilty when I have to kill characters. I do.
Sean's shaking his head. I quite liked it, but
I didn't like that film. I didn't like that film because she's an editor and she has this giant office. I don't know any editors who have giant offices. And I think that's part of the thing that makes me...
I do know an editor at Penguin Children's Books in New York who has, I don't think it's a big office, but it's got an amazing view from the window.
Oh, yeah, they all do in New York. They're fantastic views. But I think I resent unrealistic depictions of the industry, just like some people depict unrealistic depictions. Some people resist what am I trying to say?
We're with you.
Unrealistic depictions of the industry in the same way that some people don't like unrealistic depictions of apartment life in New York. Or,
yeah, of course.
It's a fantasy though, isn't it?
It's a fantasy.
It is a fantasy, yeah.
I mean, being an actor sucks, surely. If you're on Broadway, that would be exhausting, 8 shows a week.
It would just become a shift work, really, essentially. There was a website that used to, I think I might have talked about this before in the podcast, a website that, and I can't find it anymore, but it like hypothesizes someone's income.
Oh, based on like
and I was on this website.
Sex and the City or whatever, based on her.
Yeah. I was on this website. I don't know how that happened. I didn't put myself there, but
sure.
Yeah, sure. Alex makes $1 million, but it was absurd. Like the amount, like I don't know what it like. Okay, he wrote a few plays. Like unless I'm making $5 million a play, this makes no sense. And I've heard that from another writer friend of mine was absolutely attacked by a shock jock, and the shock jock was going, "You profit millions of dollars," and she's like, no.
I was at a seminar once.
Not even millions of
cents. Of literary studies, like English scholars, so not creative writing scholars, and they were talking about Kate Grenville and The Secret River, and about there was a lot of controversy about that book, and they're like, "Oh, she only did it to make the money," and I was like, "What money? Like, how much money do you think a literary author in Australia is making? Seriously, there's no way she wrote any of that for the money."
Not.
No.
It's so it's the glamour, it's the unrealistic lifestyle portrayal that grinds his gears.
I think so because being a writer is sitting at home alone, scowling at your computer, working long hours and not being paid for it. I mean, there's an inner joy. I think there's an inner magic and an inner wondrous beauty to being a storyteller that we get to enjoy all the time when we write. But most of the time it's solitary and a bit probably unhygienic as well. Because, you don't wash your clothes or, clean your house like in Romancing the Stone.
I read a really lovely thing yesterday. It was about self-esteem because, like Alex, I'm a little bit obsessed with pop psychology. I think this is like how I research characters. So they were talking about self-esteem, and they were saying creative people, like writers, have high self-esteem because they have the capacity to go off and work independently and be self-resilient, like to be able to be self-contained, to give themselves the emotional nourishment they need while they innovate and create by themselves. I thought, well, that's interesting because we usually think the opposite. The sad, lonely little Gollum characters.
Well, because you're not getting validation at any point in that process.
No, there's no audience clapping.
It's interesting being around actors again because there is a need, I don't mean this in an unkind way, but there is a need for validation.
I saw you roll your eyes, Alex. I saw it.
But there is.
I have the video to
He
prove
was
it.
There's a
also an
constant
actor.
kind of, there's a constant need. And I think for writers, that's just not a possibility. Might be a very delayed possibility. Many years later, someone might go, read your book, well done.
Yeah, it was medium.
Medium.
No, but I think even when you get the reviews or the feedback, it feels like they're praising someone else because it's the you from a long time ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you feel, the last week or so, I felt weirdly dissected in a way that's actually, if anything, made me slightly uncomfortable. Like it's all very positive, but it's also like, oh, they're all in my head now.
Oh my God, I know. Like I remember getting reviewed. Like I remember my agent contacting me and being like, "Oh, you're in the Weekend Australian," and like sending me a screen capture of the article. It's like, oh God, people all around the country are reading my neurosis, like where they point out
Exactly.
this or that. Or...
Exactly. It's like, oh, they really know. Yeah, they really know where your brain's at.
But I really want to be invisible. I mean, here I am on a podcast yapping away. But in terms of when people read my book, I just read the book. You don't need to know about me. Just read the book.
And maybe that's the crucial difference. It's actually about stories. It's not about, for us, it's about connect with the story. Don't necessarily connect with me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I resist stories about writers, because it feels like that's not what storytelling's about. It's not about the writer.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being unfair in wanting to completely exclude the writer from all narratives.
The author is dead. Yeah.
The author is dead indeed.
All right. Well, I think we're coming to the end of the episode. We'll have to have a think about if there's more. There are a lot of books about writers, like a lot.
There certainly are.
Maybe we're not as attracted to reading them, but a good question.
I just finished one. I just finished Elizabeth Knox's The Absolute Book, her latest book. And the main character in that is an academic writer who writes about destroyed libraries. I mean, it's also about many, many, many other things as well. But she's a writer and a lot of her concerns and practices felt very, very real to me. So I don't want to damn the entire practice of writing or depicting writers as being crap and not worth exploring, because it is, obviously. But
We like it when you're a grumpy old man. It's fine. Go nuts.
It's rare. It's quite rare.
You're usually all sunshine and light and unicorns, so go for it.
So we just, before we go, should we just briefly mention what we're working on now? We used to do that. That used to
We
be a thing.
did used to do that.
we had a whole episode of that I haven't edited yet.
It will be out eventually. What are you doing today? How about that? What are you going to go do today, Alex, writing-wise?
Writing-wise, I am going to start a new play for ATYP. I've so far written a title, and then I went lunch.
ATYP is the Australian Theatre for Young People.
Australian Theatre for Young People,
what's
yeah.
the
And I'm
title?
quite excited by it. I know who the villain is. This is typically Alex. I know who the villain is, so that's all I care about.
Are you going to tell us the title that you came
Well,
up
I
with?
want him to change the title.
Yeah,
so I
Sean
don't
wants me
think
to
you should
change
even
the
do
title,
that.
so we're going to just...
What is it?
Sean wants it to be called Uncanny. At the moment, it's called The Uncanny Valley.
Right. Well, we'll touch base about who wins this argument. Sean, what are you doing today?
I'm marking. Hey, and getting over my
Yay.
COVID jab, which I'm very happy to have had.
Oh, yes, I had mine on the weekend.
Yes.
I've got to actually go and get mine booked. That's the other thing I have to do today.
I'm
Yeah,
all magnetic,
straight
so that crackling you can hear in the background is my new superpower.
That's
There's
him
been
tapping
forks
into the
flying
storybook.
at him.
Well, I am editing my book and I am marking, so both. But the editing, I broke the back of early this morning. I was feeling really stressed about it, but this morning I think I've worked out the story problems.
That's
So,
fantastic.
Fantastic.
Tick.
Brilliant.
Now I just have to do it.
I just want to say that Alex is officially on holidays at the moment, but is actually writing. So
Yeah,
I
you're
think
working.
that's
You should reverse your holiday.
it's a pretty fine summary of what writer's life is like. You write
So
every
you're
day.
podcasting and writing on your holiday.
I might get a pasty later.
Walk on the beach. See you next time. Thanks for joining us to talk about depictions of writers and how much Sean hates them.
Hey, thanks for hosting, Amy. Hey.
See you next time.
Bye.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them starts with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Walk on the beach.
We work for such little reward, don't we, guys?
Do you know what's amazing? In the last episode with John Luca and Lisa, we had that new catchphrase, which was something about wizard. What was it?
Could be wizard, might be wizard.
That was wizard. Is it wizard? Is it wizard?
Was it wizard? And now we've talked about wizardry in writing, like being a wizard. So
I'm going to start calling myself a warlock.
story wizard.
Story
warlock.
wizard.
I'm a story warlock.
You usually think it sounds more evil, right?
It does. It sounds better.
Right.
Alex, you can be a story warlock. I can be a word wizard. Are you
I'm definitely a witch.
Prose magician?
I'm a time-travelling witch. I was born at Halloween. I'm a time-travelling witch.
A drama witch.
All right. Drama llama. All right. So we're going to say goodbye from the warlock, the wizard and the witch.
Hey.